Waking up once and being over 60 twice a night, occasionally even 3 times. Only to urinate. This could be the most you will hear an important message today. Considering that, what if I told you that the actual reason you continue to wake up isn't your bladder, your age, or your prostate growth? It's a private matter. Behavior that you've had for many years, and it's subtly changing the way you sleep. Your body and vitality without you even being aware. I'm board-certified physician Dr. Mohit Khera. A urologist with more than 30 years of expertise in caring for guys in their 60s and 70s and more. I have assisted thousands of men like you reclaim their evenings and their self-respect by discovering one secret piece of information about their most personal routines. As you can see, most males never hear this. There is a common habit of masturbating. That causes the prostate to inflame silently, perplexes the bladder, and interferes with the nerve impulses that enable you to getting a good night's sleep. Isn't not about how frequently you do it, but rather how you do it and the pressure and position you're putting yourself on the exact system that regulates your flow. However, the good news is that after you correct this one habit, several men sleep through it. Once more, there will be no more 2 a.m. dashes to there is no longer any restless throwing in the restroom. The shadows, and in this video, I'll show you just what's taking place. To adapt and how to feel well after sleeping and in command as of tonight. Prior to delving more into this subject speaks to you already, take a moment to turn on alerts and subscribe. Every week, I post useful, non-nonsense content. Health guidance created especially for guys over 60, particularly the items that most physicians avoid discussing, and if the video speaks to you, type 1 in the if it doesn't type 0, please remark so I can assist you more effectively the next time. So let's go deep, where it all begins. Within your body that is connected to the majority of men are unaware of its existence. Your prostate, your bladder, and your delicate system is formed by the pelvic nerves. That regulates more than just your urination. However, when, why, and when one component of that system is even a little upset, everything becomes unbalanced. The reality is that you have been perhaps the best way to stimulate yourself is to place simply sufficient force on your prostate to set off a chain reaction every night. And it occurs gradually and softly until suddenly, you awaken to find yourself in wondering what went wrong. The prostate. The relationship between the prostate, pelvis, and bladder. Harold was a patient that I can still recall. He has 3 children and was 74 years old. An older technician with rough hands from a lifetime of work entered my office. Using a straightforward complaint document, I'm only exhausted, waking up 3 times a night to urinate because I can't recall when I last slept through it all, and he had already attempted reducing fluid intake using the restroom, even with a prescription, before bed. Drugs, but nothing altered. He was weary and perplexed. I asked him a question that most men don't hear: what their physicians have to say about your personal habits that you never bring up. He paused before telling me that frequently masturbated while seated, typically late in the evening, stooped over. For decades, he had done it that way. And everything suddenly made sense to you. Your prostate is located directly beneath the bladder and gently encircles the urethra. It is tiny, roughly the size of a walnut, but it is really important in how your body regulates the flow of urine as your prostate grows more sensitive as you age. Not necessarily ill, but more responsive to the position of pressure and inflammation. Imagine spending a lot of time sitting down. Particularly when using the loo, your pelvis is your stomach is tight and twisted, and the muscular group in the pelvic floor that supports your prostate and bladder is squeezed upon stimulation. Yourself in that situation, particularly unknowingly, you're using force or tension. Extracting the vitality from that entire system, even in tiny doses, causes the body to react. Of pressure applied repeatedly over time may result in prostate microinflammation that consequently, inflammation aggravates the bladder and perplexes your internal signs that you may not even have urine within, but the surrounding nerves. Your bladder tells your brain to get up and move now. Harold and the guys at 2 a.m., like when he wakes up to use the loo. They didn't initially require this. Is not the body's failing, rather, it's a misinterpretation of how your body currently works, and you can escape when you're young. With anything, but your body after 60 requests a different level of attentiveness, patience, as well as improved alignment, and the unexpected aspect is that it's not simply what's going on within you, is also because the next habit is where you do it. It is one that almost all men believe is harmless, but in reality, it's among the most harmful of the two. The one routine that keeps you alert, that's keeping you up. Something concerning the loo is that the door locks and feels secure. Quiet, for many males, it's private. Particularly as people age, it becomes more than a simple rest area themselves, it turns into the only area in nobody interrupts in the house where over the years, nobody has asked any questions. I've repeatedly heard that from my good men in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s, telling me occasionally with shame that they frequently engage in masturbation. As I sat on the toilet, it began. Convenience made it a habit. However, the majority of them were unaware of this. The one that feels secure in that situation is hurting them covertly, not in some spectacular, agonizing manner, but gradually and quietly and gradually over time. When you sit with your thighs bent forward, tightening your abdomen, you're unintentionally stopping the flow of the precise region you're attempting to activate. The muscular group in your pelvic floor that supports the prostate and bladder. Pushed into a state of squeezed stress, there is limited blood supply to the nerves. Squeezed, with your prostate serving as the entryway to your enjoyment as well as your urination, gets constantly pinched without you even being aware of it. This behavior has a knock-on effect. The body gradually becomes irritated in the quiet that results, with inflammation. Nerves are irritated by swelling surrounding the bladder, and that discomfort sends erroneous alerts to your brain. That sound alarms at night to wake you awake that make you feel as though you must go. Even I've observed you when your bladder isn't full. Repeatedly, males who believe they possess an excessively active bladder when, in fact, the pelvic area is under a lot of stress. Wailing for help. I recall a patient named Marvin who told me, following the modification of this one behavior, standing rather than lounging rather than hurrying, he went from waking nightly 3 times to once and, ultimately, not at all, and he didn't require one pill will get you there. The thing that shocked him the most was not how the speed at which things improved, was how such a tiny, unintentional habit could lead to such a significant issue, and trust me when I say he's not by himself due to the fact that even if you're standing, you have completely ceased sitting. The majority of men still do one thing that really disrupts their system each and every when they're ready to be released. It has everything related to how quickly they attempt to complete 3 how tos for masturbation. How your bladder is confused by masturbation. Errors cause your bladder to become confused. When do you wake up? I once asked a patient. How much do you really do at night? He hesitated and replied, to be honest, sometimes it's just a trickle, doctor. However, the impulse feels strong, like I'm about to. The key is to explode that right there. So it's more than simply how full your bladder is. That's the source of your confusion. Your bladder has turned into your body's urinary system, which is visible. Doesn't function solely by volume but rather by symptoms that your bladder is continuously communicating with your brain via a nervous system's delicate web, yet when those nerves become inflamed due to pelvic tension, inflammation, or chronic strain, they begin to malfunction, and they send false alarms, and one of the primary reasons for that, the way you've been touching me has annoyed me personally, particularly if you've been doing things with haste, power, or intensity. When you haste or hold on too firmly during the procedure, you're not only accelerating the process, you're instructing your panic mode for the nervous system. The muscles of the pelvic floor tense. Blood flow surrounding the prostate contracts and becomes unpredictable, and those who have sensitive nerves start to handle every small feeling as though there is an emergency. Now double the trend by the number of months. Years, your body begins to live in a loop, one in which even the tiniest bladder pressure can trigger a when the alarm goes off at 2 a.m., you stagger to the bathroom to hardly create a stream, and I wonder if this is a normal part of growing older. However, this is what I want you to hear. I have had patients, so it doesn't have to be totally turned around this cycle. Not with medicine, but with awareness, they slowed down and relaxed their hold. They ceased coercing and began listening, and eventually their anxiety relaxed, the sense of urgency subsided, and sleep went back. This has nothing to do with your bladder, it concerns the way things have been misinterpreted and overstimulated for too long, and the remedy starts not only with reducing but changing how you do it, because in the minutes that follow, we're examining the change that makes every difference is a straightforward, potent method of touching that might appear initially counterintuitive but can genuinely reprogram your body to heal strength and greater contentment. Mild is powerful, for gentle rewiring is powerful. Routine. I've had more over the years. More discussions with men than I can count who sit across from me with their eyes and arms folded, a little uncertain, and make a statement saying, "Doc, I just want this to end. I just don't need all the nonsense. Need comfort," and I understand that life teaches us to be prompt, effective, and even covert. For many of you worked hard for decades, managing stress when raising a family, and lacked the luxury of being slow or delicate. You entered, left, and went on, but what? One warns that if you're 60, your body's softness is more important than quickness. When you indulge in self-gratification too quickly, when you inspect it as if it were another duty, your nervous system does not use the list. Let your muscles rest without braces. They stiffen rather than soften, and instead of obtaining the hormonal advantages of linkages such as oxytocin and dopamine or serotonin, you experience a spike in anxiety. You may climax after an accident, but it makes you feel exhausted rather than contented, but everything slows down when you slow down. Alterations. I've observed males in their 70s find new sensory layers easily by granting themselves authorization to leave. They pick up touch more slowly. Consciousness to take a breath and pause in between motions, to change from pressure to presence, as well as when they act. Amazing things occur in their nervous system. Starts to feel secure once more in the pelvic. Blood flows when muscles stop tightening. Openly, the body begins to recover from years of strain and force. A 66-year-old guy told me that he cried. He slowed down for the first time, not because of sorrow, but because this is the first time in decades that he experienced a genuine feeling. He stated something profound: "I didn't realize how estranged I had grown from my own body. I felt alive when my body slowed down." Once more. You know, enjoyment isn't intended to be not hurried, not at this age. It's intended to be accepted, but even if you are careful and gentle in whatever you do, there is still one important query that lingers: how frequently is too frequently or too little? Because in terms of restoring the rhythm of your body, the touch frequency is more important than most men understand, so let's discuss that. Next, what to expect over the next 7 days. 5 things to anticipate in 7 days. Among the most frequent queries I hear following a man's journey through these modifications is, "Doc, would it truly create a distinction?" And I always respond with the same, yes, if you treat your body with the deference it deserves. Requesting it won't get a response right away. Not all at once, but frequently more quickly than as you may guess. I've witnessed it occur in as short a time as 7 days. Ed was a man who was 71 years old. Proud of a retired school principal for years, the grandpa of 5 has agreed that rising in the middle of the night to urinate was simply a natural part of growing older. Twice or 3 times each night, upset, worn out, and considering he required a more potent drug, but when during our conversation, I described how he touched himself, hurried, and seated himself tensely, maybe subtly bothering his prostate, he still appeared astonished and doubtful. He consented to a few minor adjustments. Instead of sitting, stand up and slow down. Of breathing and hurry rather than brace. When he contacted me 7 days later, his voice was lighter. "I slept all night long, for," he said, "for the first time in years, I felt refreshed this morning, doctor. Didn't think it could function that quickly." And Ed isn't by himself when men start being patient with their body softness in place of pressure. Instead of putting stress on their systems, they start to readjust, they get deeper sleep, and they feel less rushed and reclaim that silence. Most of us lack a sense of control. Acknowledge our loss until it comes back. Many males describe waking up in just 1 week. Occasionally or never at all, their urine flow increases their vitality rebounds, and, perhaps most significantly, they begin to feel hopeful once more, not because the clock has been turned backwards, but because they've finally figured out how to work with rather than against their body. But the main thing I want you to hear is the outcomes are more than simply physical. They are psychologically and emotionally reminding you that you still have the ability to change while maintaining a positive emotional state once more. Nevertheless, despite all of this progress, most males never do this last piece. Consider that it is not about your actions with your hands or the frequency of something more profound, something sentimental spiritual in nature, and it could be the most crucial component of the 6 is this. This has to do with wisdom, not shame. Is about wisdom more than humiliation. Among the most devastating things in my work, I've noticed how many elderly men are silently ashamed of something. Things ought never to be a cause of shame. Some people quit touching their own bodies, believing they are too old as a whole. Whether exhausted or too broken, others continue, but covertly hurrying through the performance like it should be kept a secret. Something to bear instead of enjoyed, and too many people believe they are no longer able to feel anything at all significant. However, let me clarify this from one to another human being: your body still, your enjoyment is still important, and your relationship with yourself in particular is more significant throughout this stage of life. More than ever, being youthful again isn't the goal of this. About letting go of outdated routines that don't work for you and accepting a new form of strength based on the existence of patience and a deeper knowing what your body requires. Now when you approach enjoyment of yourself with a desire to reunite rather than flee, you no longer handle it like a machine task and begin treating it with respect as something sacrosanct. You leave the stage and out of routine and into the presence of a relationship with oneself. Despite its subtlety, the shift is strong because removing shame, you create space for consciousness. When you stop concealing, you begin to heal. You cease exerting yourself and begin. As you listen to it, everything starts to alter: your sleeping and emotional patterns,